Hello, theme park enthusiasts, and welcome back to Planet Coaster. In the last episode, we went ahead and created the roller coaster that I showed there at the beginning of the episode. That's in the background now. In this episode, trying something a bit different here, I've gone ahead and recorded footage of the construction of some of the theming of this area, and I'm just going ahead and voicing over it to explain what I was doing and what I was thinking at the time. So here, I'm going to go ahead and put a train, even though it's not located here, just like the one at the beginning of the park, because of the fact that I'm wanting to ensure that the train tracks go where I want them to. So I want to make sure that the train tracks will run around these buildings that I'm putting in. So need to put that in first, and then I'm going to be, in this episode, designing what are the most iconic buildings, I would say, of Cliffs Amusement Park in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which are these Old West style buildings. The train goes directly around them, in between the footpath and the buildings, and it's one of those that when you come into the park you can see them a little bit of distance away. They're slightly up on a hill, but I didn't really feel like trying to get elevations to change here, so I went ahead and just put them on the flat plan. And while I'm doing this, I am referencing pictures of the location, so that way I can try to get it as accurate as I can. There are different heights, and as you can see here, we have different angles going on also. So with this, as I said, it's sort of an old-fashioned Wild West front to the buildings here. They don't have backs as far as I'm aware, because of the fact that there's actually going to be a ride in behind them, and the major roller coaster of the park also swoops down and around them as well. So really they're just there more for show than anything else, but they do form a really important part of the park. So here, as I said, I'm just referencing some photos that I was able to find of the buildings and trying to find the wood that sort of fits with that. I am going to be going back through afterwards here, probably in a couple episodes, maybe toward the end of the series even, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the theming around these buildings. So I've set up the buildings now, but I'm going to go ahead and put in like the barrels and lassos and things of that nature that just go around the buildings overall. So that way they'll be more defined and just more realistic looking for the park. I also will be attaching, as one of the links in the end of this video, the train ride through Cliffs Amusement Park, which gives you an overview of the entire park, and you go past these buildings specifically on the train, and I did get some good footage of that on my other channel, Travel Ventures. So I'm going to go ahead and have that link here at the end of the video, so that way you're able to see how my recreation sort of compares to what was going on there in the real park. So at this point, I've sort of gotten the facades established the way I want, and now it's a matter of putting in a staircase that's attached to one of the buildings here. It is a wooden staircase in the actual park, but there's no real wood staircase that looks the way I wanted it to. So realistically, this metal one was as close as I could get, and I just wanted to make sure that it sort of fit where I wanted it to. And then I went ahead and put in the balcony that it's supposed to attach to, even though that balcony, once again, is just a facade, not actually used for any kind of structure or anything of that nature. So once I had it in place, I adjusted the staircase here so that it sort of butted up against it, and then just adjusted it slightly. Changed the color, felt that the black was the one that sort of allowed it to blend in the most and just allowed it to be hidden in the background. Then I decided that the brown maybe from the building would work better, and sort of like the way that looked. It somewhat gives it a woodish color, though not exactly perfect. As I said, this is a part of Cliffs that I do feel like makes it stand out from other parks in the area. Right here, I'm basically just going through and trying the different types of fencing to find what I feel looks best for the front of this area. Then I'm going to put the fence around the walkways here just to keep people out of the area, because we are going to have a train running through the area. So don't need people getting crushed by the train or anything of that nature, or clipping through the train, which would be accurate to this game. So just putting that out front and then simply extending it outwards. I'm going to do the same on this side here. But as I was saying, I in previous videos did create Western Playland, or my version of Western Playland, a recreation in the game. And while I'm very pleased with that, one thing about Western Playland, it for one made it simpler to make in Planet Coaster, and also made it just overall a different style of park, is that it lacks theming overall. Basically, you just have the different rides there, and the park is really focused on solely the rides. Cliffs is primarily focused on the rides, but they do have some theming that goes around, and this area here specifically is probably their most detailed theming. So I really wanted to take some time, take an entire episode here, and do that theming. Now, I've sped up the footage here so that way it doesn't bore people or take as long as it would otherwise. Realistically, this recreation here probably took me about an hour of time in order to get it done, and there are things, as I said, that I'm going to go back in and still improve. So I'm going to add in some more theming. I'm going to get rid of any things that I feel just are inaccurate or just in the way. Here I was just playing around trying to figure out what fencing would look the best for the particular area, and since these are not built as direct pieces of the building, I am having to sort of get the angles and everything adjusted by hand as I go along here. Once again, this is just a balcony that's there for facade. It doesn't actually have any way out onto it as far as I could tell, so it's just something there that people can use. Some of these pieces here I'm just looking at because of the fact that I'm not going to use them on this particular balcony, but I did want to know what they look like so that way I will use them in other areas. Again, here just looking at the pieces, sort of seeing what they look like and playing around with them a bit. I wasn't exactly happy with the color of these pieces, but at the same time it was one of those that I was limited somewhat on the options that I had. So I went with what did fit, and overall I'm fairly pleased with it. Was trying to get this piece separated from the other pieces here, so that way I could go ahead and delete it, because somehow it had just popped out there in the middle of nowhere when I was looking at the different pieces of fencing. Same as there is that fencing down there by the staircase that I also am going to have to deal with. So that will be removed at a point in time, right there. And then I can go back to sort of getting everything else looking the way I want it to. Again, this would have been a wooden post banister up here, but I liked the style. It fit more with what I was looking for, even though it was metal and somewhat obvious that it's metal. So I blended it as best I could. I think it fits with the color of these walls over here, but again, it's not exactly perfect. It's, like I said, this is a attempted recreation, not something that I'm very professional about, and simply just something that I wanted to do my best with. And the overall result, I'm pretty pleased with. I think it turned out decent overall. So in the next episode then, my plan is to go back to Galaxy, the roller coaster that I created, add the little bit of theming that it has to it by just putting a overhang over the line queue a bit, and put the name of the roller coaster onto it. And then I'm going to go over to the other side of this facade, across the path from it, and create the building that goes on that side that's going to have a few shops and such in it for things like food and drinks. So we'll be getting those into the park in the next episode, and then after that I'm going to go ahead and continue with installing rides into the park. The next few rides are going to be flat rides, so I'm not going to really have to spend a lot of time on them. I will probably try to get 3 of them in one episode, because I'm going to be putting in a tilt-a-whirl, a drop tower, and a sky flyer all at the same time, I hope. And the reason I want to do that is because that basically gets me set up then where I can go ahead and put in the major roller coaster of the park, the Rattler, which is a wooden coaster. But I really need these other rides in place first because the whole point of the Rattler is that it goes around these rides. So having them in place really gives me sort of positioning of where the other coaster should, where the coaster can go and how it should be. So again, we have this little overhang here, just theme based, doesn't really actually have a function to it, but that's perfectly fine. Here I'm just putting some legs in just to hold up that roof, and then I'm gonna do the same here of just making it where there's some way that this these upper areas are being held up. So again, since they aren't actually attached to the building, just having to adjust the posts myself in order to make them look the way that I want them to. And I mean, the building is coming out somewhat eclectic in nature, but I think that actually really works for the place because of the fact that the entire building would be assembled by whatever they had at the particular time period. They wouldn't have, you know, the option of making sure that all the pieces of wood matched identically, anything of that nature, in an Old West town. So there would be sort of an eclectic look to it. And I think that the park does try to capture that in what they have as well, so I was pretty pleased with the way that went. I had originally thought about putting the larger beams there and just didn't feel it fit, so needed to adjust that to just the posts. Put those in. Then, as I said, I'll probably come back to this area, do a little bit of landscaping, as well as adding some accessories to it. But for here, basically I'm pretty pleased with the way it's coming out overall, and what I'm going to end up doing after this is simply just adding some doors and windows to the facades in order to make them look more like the fronts of buildings. So just adding in these last few posts here, and then we'll go ahead and add those doors and windows in. I really am enjoying doing these recreations overall because I feel like while I have my own ideas of things that I would enjoy doing, I am liking something to base my designs off of. So it's not that I'm having to try to figure out how everything should look specifically, but instead I can go ahead and try to match things that already exist. It allows me to play around with the Planet Coaster system a bit more, get to understand how things are, and then sort of mix and match and play with theming some, so that when I do end up building my own park eventually, I'll really have a grasp of how it should be and how I want it to look before I start. So here again, I was just going back and forth to the pictures, trying to find doors that I felt matched the picture somewhat, but at the same time were accurate to the location, and one of those where it's like, okay, I can change the color of it in this case to make it fit properly, and just little adjustments like that just to get it as accurate as possible. Additionally, with these buildings, some of the pictures I had from other people that I found on Google and such are different than what I saw when I was there myself. So I did somewhat of a conglomeration of the two. Some of the things I liked better in the pictures that have either been redesigned or just allowed to somewhat, I guess, fall apart, you might say, since that time period. So some of these buildings now look a bit more rustic than they did in some of the earlier pictures. And to a point, that can be a good thing because it is supposed to be a Wild West location. But at the same time, too rustic just is too much. And so I did want to go a little bit back so that it had that look that just where, yes, it's an old West town, but that it still had some attention going on. Some people cared about what was going on with it. So that's where some of the buildings are a bit more fresh than they were in the during my visit to the location. Some of the things had more boarded up look going on to them now, and I just thought that it was better with it in this more freshened up look. here I was just moving the windows so that the two in the center are a bit closer together, which they are on the actual facade, and then just putting on this top area for it. Then I needed to sort of finish off the top area, figure out which wood it was that I was using for that, just to get it to look right. Here I started putting on these pieces just because this one did have a little bit more of a decorative edge. Didn't have something that exactly matched what I wanted, but I was pleased enough with the rounded pieces. But then I realized there are two different rounded pieces because it only has sort of an overhang on one side of it, and I wanted to make sure that I had the pieces that matched properly for that. So I wanted the overhang facing forward a bit there, as I now have it, and I just like the look of it. So I'm just looking for a window here in order to put on to finish off this building, and to sort of finish off the build overall. If you like what I did in this episode, please go ahead and click the like button. If you've not already, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon, so that you're aware when I produce new videos in the future. Thank you. I hope to see you all again for the next episode of Planet Coaster.